this moment when the wife gets really angry about something and she looks over to her husband and she gives him the glare, and then he has to do exactly what she wants him to do because he's like a dog that just follows orders. That's not a great dynamic for a marriage. And if you find yourself falling down into that, then you should probably stop. Welcome to Mom Alternative, where we talk about motherhood and parenting problems. Our focus of the day is on mothers-in-law. And the question that we'll be trying to answer is it really the end of the world? We'll be talking about a mother-in-law who stocked her house as if she has a baby, another one who cut her grandson's hair, obviously without permission from the parents, and one who licked her granddaughter's hand. Our first thread of the day is titled Mother-in-law's House Looks Like She Has a Baby. Just a rant, my mother-in-law has every item necessary for a baby at her house. She has diapers, clothes, bottles, a high chair, and more. She buys him stuff and shows us like she's going to give it to us, but then she keeps it. She's done that with 2 pairs of shoes already. I swear she has more toys and baby stuff at her house than I do at mine. When she comes over to our house and if she sees something that she likes, she'll buy it for her house. If you went to her house, you would literally think that she had a baby again. I even told her that joking yesterday, and she said all she has to do is buy a crib, which she said she's planning on. Yo, my son just turned 1 in March and is not staying the night at her house anytime soon. Now, I find this one so funny because actually, in many ways, I think it's kind of cool that she is having this whole experience by herself and buying all these things, and then she's actually keeping them at her house. That seems to me like a much better alternative than if she decides that she wants to buy all of these things, but she actually wants you to use them. And so she buys mountains and mountains and mountains of toys that you don't like and you don't want at your home, but then she gifts them to you. And then you feel bad because like it's a gift and you should take it and so on. We've covered a couple of scenarios like that where a mother-in-law is just so intense about gift giving that it creates problems. So actually, it seems to me like this is a pretty good alternative. Like there's a lot of pluses to it. Number one, you don't have to keep any of the stuff that she's excited about in your home, so you don't need to deal with the clutter. And number two, if you ever take your baby over there, you don't need to pack up anything. She has diapers, she has wipes, she has clothes, etc., etc. So it's actually very low effort for you. I get the point of saying she's going a bit overboard, but if she has the money and she wants to waste it, then that's her choice, right? She's a grown adult woman. She gets to make her decisions. So actually, if this was my mother-in-law, I honestly wouldn't care all that much. I would still see it as a bit of a waste of money. And I would maybe have a conversation about the crib and say, look, we're not going to be leaving him here overnight anytime soon. But like I said, honestly, if she's not actually being overbearing and annoying in terms of she's asking repeatedly to have him spend the night over, or she keeps harassing you about having him stay over at her place, or, you know, whatever else she might want to do with the child, if she's actually just reliving the experience of buying things for a baby and she's doing that all by herself in her little corner in her house, then honestly, I don't see the harm. I don't think it hurts anyone. I don't think it hurts you. I kind of think very much that this is one of the least harmful ways that that desire and that behavior could manifest itself. So I'm actually pretty okay with it. The first comment here says, well, she'll be disappointed when she never gets to use that stuff. I can understand some basic stuff like a pack and play and wipes and toys, but these grandmas that go all out are off their rockers. And like, maybe, yeah, you know, I don't disagree that you don't need to go overboard and you don't need to, you know, stock your place as if you're going to have the baby over all the time. But honestly, I think in-laws just get really excited and it feels like a big deal for them. And the idea of being able to shop for baby clothes is just really exciting. And I don't feel that there is a need to take that joy and fun away from someone. It only honestly annoys me when you're gifted with a lot of stuff that you don't want and you don't want to keep and you don't want to use. And there I think it's a little bit irritating because now you have to find something to do with that stuff. Then it becomes a problem that you need to solve. But if it's really all kept in that place, then I'm just like, yeah, well, is it really a big deal? The next person, also very like completely over the top. She says, I would make it a point that things don't get used at her house and go to waste, but I can be super petty. Yeah, that sounds super petty. Again, I would understand it if there was something about those things that like annoyed you, that you don't want to use, that it's poisonous, is made of a material that you don't want in contact with your child, that there's some kind of reason for it. But just to make the point of, you don't actually have a baby, like I'm pretty sure she knows that she doesn't actually have a baby. She's just reliving it in whatever way makes her happy. And then she's like, maybe some of these things will become useful and you can use them when you get the opportunity to. And that's kind of it. Next one says, on the bright side, at least you don't need to pack anything when you go visit. Right? Like that's a pretty big bright side, honestly. It's so annoying if you go somewhere with a baby and then you've forgotten to bring your wipes over, or you don't find diapers or something like that. That's so much more irritating and frustrating than this as an alternative. I would take this any day. One person replies to this. She says, for real, my son's grandparents don't have anything for him, so it's like packing for a vacation every time we go there. And you can see it's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't. So if you do pack up your house as a grandparent, if you do pack up everything in your house, so you have all the things that are needed to look after a baby there, then the daughter-in-law and maybe even your son is going to be really annoyed at you because, oh my God, you're going overboard. And then if you don't, then it's also annoying because like now it's really annoying. I have to pack up all this stuff. So come on. I think this is one of those cases where I'd say this is not the end of the world. This person says, if my mother-in-law had done this, I would have seen it as a challenge to never use a single baby wipe. These women are nuts. I really just fundamentally think that when people respond to completely perfectly harmless things with this level of vitriol and pettiness, then there's something going on with them. Like I don't know why. I don't know why you care so much. If you could ignore it and never think about it, and then maybe once in a while when you're over at her place, she might bring out a wet wipe and you can use the wet wipe. Like maybe that's the extent of it. And then that's it. It's like just case closed. You never have to waste a single thought on that whole problem anymore. Here's another one. She says, I always think them buying clothes for the house is especially weird. Like the baby won't be coming over naked, and no, you will not be changing them just for fun. But shoes, 2 pairs? Babies barely even need shoes, let alone 2 pairs for only at grandma's. Sounds like she likes blowing money. And yeah, like maybe she does. I feel bad very much when people decide to do this at times where maybe they don't have the money to spare. Maybe they could be doing other things with that money. But honestly, if she does have the money to spare, if it doesn't hurt her to waste some money on a pair of shoes, a pair of baby shoes particularly, that I would just kind of be like, yeah, like I'm not going to do anything with this, but so long as you're not giving it to me, I really don't care. I truly just deep down in my heart of hearts, I could not care less. And then this one, again, you'll see how much perspective changes how you deal with situations. This person says, every time you go over there and change the baby, stuff diapers and wipes in your bag. That stuff's expensive. You see, you could, I'm pretty sure she actually would not even care about you taking it because then she gets to go buy more. Like, I'm pretty sure that's the case. Here's another example. Honestly, I wish my mother-in-law would do this. They refuse to have anything for my baby at their house, pack and play included. It's such a pain to pack everything up for a simple visit, so we don't go much. They are over an hour away and give us a hard time about it. My parents have tons of things for my baby, not a crazy amount, but enough that if we forgot something and such, and it's so nice. I literally just bring a diaper bag with food and a couple of diapers and clothes because they have most of it. Extra clothes and diapers included. Just pointing out, because both sets of grandparents are polar opposites in this, I'd rather they have stuff even if I bought it and they kept it there. This is a little bit funny to me because I would not have this expectation towards my in-laws either, because I think it's fair enough for them to say, hey, you know what, we only have so much space, we're pretty limited, we don't want a lot of clutter, so we don't want to save things that will be used maybe once every few months, especially in this case where she says they live quite far away and so they only go over quite rarely. I mean, you can just pack up a bag that you always take with you and then you have it all packed and ready every time you go, and then it's a lot less hassle and a lot less effort, and it's not quite that complicated to do. And then you still buy the extra stuff that you would in theory leave over at their house, but you just have it in a dedicated space in your closet, and then you don't have to think about it anymore. But yes, so This is not the end of the world, people. I think that sometimes these in-law problems are just so minor that it boggles the mind. Some people obviously do experience serious problems with their in-laws, and there is fair enough. But this one is like the best possible outcome that could happen, because it does not even seem like the mother-in-law is being super overbearing or super insistent by doing this. She's just into stocking up her place and she wants to be ready. And if that makes her happy, then who does it hurt? The next one is titled, Mother-in-law Cut My Son's Hair, Moving Forward Advice. Yesterday, while babysitting, my mother-in-law cut my 18-month-old son's hair. She butchered off a good 2 inches. It was his first haircut. Yesterday, I was livid, crying, angry, etc. I have spoken to her and told her how out of line she was. She's not the mother. It's not her decision to make. It looks bad, and so on. I didn't accept her apology yesterday, but I think I will be the better person and accept it, but not forget. So my initial anger is lessening. Today I'm more sad and hurt. I'm still crying a bit, and it breaks my heart seeing my beautiful son with a messed up haircut. And he is beautiful. I know all of our kids are, but he really is. And he had beautiful hair that this woman ruined. She was starting to watch him once a week. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and this was giving me some time for myself. This was only week 2 of the arrangement. We were hoping this could be a once-a-week thing. My husband and I were pretty excited. I started to work out and was just feeling good to have some me time again, and then this happened. It puts me in a bad position because I want the time off, but I almost want to punish her for what she did. My mom thinks I should be the bigger person, and now that boundaries are set, it'll be better. My husband understands that if I don't let her watch him again for a while. We were supposed to have a date next week. I'm wondering if we should cancel. I don't know. I guess I'm just venting. She was extremely apologetic and has never done something like this before. But the trust is broken for me. When I spoke to her, she apologized. My husband had previously called her and yelled at her, apparently. She kept going on and on with excuses. She said that she wanted to just cut a little out of his eyes, that it seemed to be bothering him. She said she didn't think of it as a haircut. She saved the hair in a bag, so that to me means that she thought it was important. She said she was not trying to undermine me. She said she does not want this to damage our relationship, and she thinks of me as a daughter. She sounded tearful. We aren't close, but I haven't had any issues. She is kind. I do think it was a dumb mistake. That's what my husband and I think anyway. We are both shocked, and that is our only reasoning, that it was a dumb mistake. I do, however, think she's too interested and involved in her kids' and grandkids' lives, but maybe it is cultural. They're a more close-knit Italian-American family. My family isn't like that. But my parents were appalled when I told them. I think in her mind, she thinks she's the expert or she knows best, and that's why she did it. Update. I cancelled the date and have put babysitting on hold. I don't need her. I do want her to know that there are consequences. I'm still angry and do not trust her. Maybe that will change one day, but I am just so disgusted by her actions. I don't want her around him unsupervised. And definitely never will I let her babysit for 6 hours again. If I do resume, it will just be a couple of hours here and there, sticking up for my son and myself. I'm going to have a bit of an unpopular opinion here, which is fundamentally that this is a complete overreaction. I honestly, I understand being super angry. I understand being pretty pissed off by it. And I would also be pretty angry and pretty pissed off if my mother-in-law, for whatever reason, decided to cut my son's hair, especially if it was his very first ever haircut, and especially if it looked quite horrendous afterwards, which I find a bit ironic. It's like, okay, if she at least cut his hair but made it look nice, and it's less of a transgression than if she just cut his hair and made him look bad at the same time. Fundamentally, I think if his haircut, if his haircut bothers me, then I would probably shear all of it off and then let it grow back. But yeah, maybe that's just me. Fundamentally though, hair does grow back. And I would understand this level of anger if maybe the mother-in-law didn't care, if she didn't think that what she did was a big deal, if she stuck to her guns and was like, I don't get why you're so angry. If she lied about it, if she made up some kind of excuse, if there was some reason to believe that she just isn't taking this seriously and she does not accept your boundaries, and if you tell her, hey, this was terrible, I don't know why you did this, please don't do anything like this again, she's like, man, I don't really see what the big deal is. If that was her response is the exact opposite. She's very apologetic. She like apologized profusely. OP here mentions multiple times that she apologized. She explained that she didn't think, she just didn't think. It was a mistake. You agree that it was a mistake. You and your husband both believe her when she says that it was a mistake. And then it's just like, well, now you're just holding on to the grudge beyond that point, punishing her by preventing her having access from her grandchild is just so over the top. It's so unnecessary. I could not imagine developing this level of resentment over a minor thing like this. So yes, it would annoy me. Yes, it would be a conversation. Yes, it is definitely her overstepping her boundaries, but you don't need to hold on to this level of rage. You don't need to be crying about it. You don't need to be livid. You don't need to like bitch at her on the phone one day and then still be pissed off the next day and then rage at her some more. And like, none of that is absolutely necessary. I wouldn't cancel my date over it with my husband. That is, I would go out and hang out with my husband. I would still trust her to babysit. I think that, you know, generally speaking, people make mistakes once and that's okay. You can say, okay, that was a crappy mistake. We can talk about it. We can agree about how to move on. And then we move on and everything is fine. And then you make a mistake a second time. And then you're like, look, okay, we already had this conversation. This is not cool. Please don't do anything like this again. And then the third time I would be like, all right, now you can stop babysitting. Fair enough. Fair enough. Like when you give people a couple of warnings, you give them a couple of chances, and it fails, then you have to go, all right, it just can't be helped. Now I need to make sure that she's not around him unsupervised. But on the very first time, you're like, she's a really kind person. We wanted her to look after him, to babysit him on a weekly basis. It was really going to make a big difference for us. She's so helpful. She's so kind. But yeah, she made this one mistake. And so now we want to teach her a lesson. Like she's an old woman. You don't need to teach her a lesson. You don't, this is not a good attitude just towards other adults. That's not how this works. You don't need to punish them. You don't like. There's something about punishment that from the dynamic side of things feels to me very much like it's parental, and she doesn't need that. She's clearly enough of a grown up that when she realized that she messed up and when you guys had a go at her, she was like, I'm really, really sorry. And she had all the excuses, presumably she had all the excuses because she understood that she really messed up. And that was it. She says that she's not trying to undermine you. She doesn't want to damage your relationship. She thinks of you as a daughter. Like if I were OP, I would just get over it. That would be my primary advice to OP. And I think everyone that told her, hey, because she updated it and she said she's sticking up for her son and herself. You don't need to stick up for your son and yourself in this way. You stuck up for your son and for yourself enough just by having a go at her and telling her that you're angry and making sure that she apologized and having at least some level of remorse, like being able to see her being remorseful. I think any anger beyond that point, when it's over something minor like this, like if she had actually harmed the child, then fine, you can apologize from here till next year and I won't forgive you. But she just snipped off a couple of bits of hair. Like, yes, it's annoying and yes, it might be ugly, but it's not. Any level of remorse would say to me, okay, she understood the point and I can move on with my life and I don't need to hold on to this level of anger. So I think this is totally over the top. As you can see, a lot of people are pretty angry about the haircut. The first person here says, so I can totally speak on this. My oldest's grandma cut her bangs horribly. When she brought her over, I was livid. I asked her why she cut them and she lied straight to my face and said, I took her to the beautician. I literally cussed this old hag out because there is no way a beautician did that to her hair. I was so mad. I never forgave her and she has even more limited contact after that. Of course, by that point, she had overstepped so many boundaries and kept ignoring my wishes. I was so tired of it. She did a lot more effed up stuff after I left him. So my going off on her then wasn't even the tip of what I said to her. I would say if she's never crossed boundaries before and you're comfortable, give her one more shot. If not, then don't. Don't feel like you have to either. She did a big no-no, but I would express your feelings to her one more time and let her know that you're willing to try again and express your boundaries. And if she oversteps again, then that's the end of it. No more second chances, but only if you're comfortable with that. And so even this person who had this experience where it's clear that there were repeated problems and this was only one out of many interactions that forced her relationship with her mother-in-law to kind of just fall apart, even she is like, I would at least give her a second shot. Like if she's remorseful, you can be a little bit nice, but only if you're comfortable. Okay. I find it hilarious always that people give advice and they're like, oh, I'm just saying that seems reasonable. You can be a little bit more absolute than that. And the next one, she says, she felt entitled because she sees herself as a third parent. This isn't about her, and it will happen again with lack of respect and boundaries. Start looking into babysitters for the odd times or date nights and stop giving her the authority. She isn't the only person who can watch your child. Oh my God. I don't like, does this person know the mother-in-law in this case? Does she have any other reason to believe that the mother-in-law is a really overbearing woman and she thinks of herself as a parent and she's always involved in she's always trying to be involved in making decisions for her grandchild? Clearly not. None of that is the case. People just get so angry about these things. I get it. It is fundamentally a parental topic in terms of haircuts. Yes, you should have full control about who cuts your baby's hair and when. Fine. But no, I would never choose to go for a babysitter unless I absolutely had to. You have to understand that with babysitters, you're just paying a stranger to look after your child. And it's like, it's fine. If that's what you have to do, then that's what you have to do. But then when you have family looking after your child. And then it's not only a question of having someone there just to look after your child while you're doing something else, which it enables, but also providing your child and the grandparent with an opportunity to build a deeper relationship with each other. And that's so much more rewarding and so much more memorable for them than having this one babysitter who looked after them once every other week or once a month while they were, a couple of years old. And then they're obviously going to forget that person. The amount of time that you spend with your grandparents, if it's actually real positive time, if it's a good relationship, if they tell you stories, and they help you out, then you really build that memory really sticks with you. That relationship really sticks with you. And obviously it's a huge source of joy for the grandparents. So actually you're doing both your son and your in-law a service by allowing them to spend time together, so long as there's not problems that are caused by that. So I just find this so sad. I find it so sad that people are immediately like, hey, drop the whole relationship as quickly as possible. This person says, this sounds like a case of poor judgment and a mistake versus something more intentional and malicious. Whether or not you choose to move forward, I strongly advise against using your child as a pawn to punish her for upsetting you. It's not setting anyone up for healthy relationships, even though it's tempting to hurt people who hurt us. Personally, given that you seem to have a neutral relationship and she's apologized and recognized that her behavior is wrong, I would continue the arrangement with the boundary that you need to be contacted before any undiscussed changes are made for or to your child. And then a person here replied to this. She says, I agree that it was poor judgment, but it was definitely not a mistake. You can't accidentally give someone a haircut. I do think that if she can recognize why that was an overstep and she genuinely apologized with a promise to never do something like this again, you can continue your arrangement. I hope it all works out. Good luck. And yeah, I think that sometimes people are in this situation where they just don't stop to think. They're a little bit, they have the idea and then they're like, I might as well just get rid of that. It looks annoying. And she didn't stop to think. And yes, it sucks. Yes, you can't really do it by accident. But in the moment, she just did not have a critical space in her brain. And that's unfortunate, but it's clearly poor judgment and clearly not intentional and malicious. And even the person who's like, yeah, it was definitely not a mistake. Even that person says, you should move on with your life and you don't need to cut off your relationship with this woman because she messed up. And that is because we had a previous previous story about a woman cutting her grandchild's hair. In that case, there was no remorse. And I really think that that's the thing that makes the biggest difference. Generally speaking, if you want to set boundaries with grandparents, so long as they understand those boundaries, and even if they make mistakes and they go over them, sometimes if you have a conversation with them and they're like, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to, and then they take a step back, then you're fine. Then that's all that needs to happen. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. It doesn't have to be something that breaks down your whole relationship with this person. I didn't highlight any of the comments where people were like, you need to punish her. It's not good to use your kids in this way, to kind of weaponize them against their grandparents or against their other parent or anything like that. It always goes badly for both parties. So it's better to just not do that. In general, I do not think that cutting hair has to be the end of the world, so long as people are remorseful, and then you can just accept that and move on. This one was a little bit hilarious to me. Was really disgusted by this one. First birthday was today, and my daughter didn't really want to eat her smash cake, but loves to offer food to other people. So she digs into the icing and holds up a handful to give me. I took a small piece from her and ate it. After barely speaking all night, my mother-in-law comes around the table and puts my baby's entire hand in her mouth in a joking manner. Then does it 2 more times and gets her own face covered in cake and icing. Probably more than my baby. I kept giving my husband the look to do something about his mom. He just laughed at it and said later that the baby enjoyed it. When he did nothing, I whisked her off to the bathroom immediately for a bath before her hands went anywhere near her mouth. Like, yeah, she did enjoy it, but she's a baby and thinks a lot of unsanitary stuff is funny. I'm just really annoyed with my husband, thinking that some of his mother's weird or gross behaviors are acceptable. In most ways, she's a very nice person, but he coddles his mom way too much, like she's going to mentally break if he says anything negative to her. And he wonders why I don't bring the kids to visit his mom more. Now, here we're also going to have the question of, is this the end of the world? And I get, people have very different hygiene standards, and I understand why, especially if she's not your mom, then you're a bit like, this is a bit messed up. I'm not into this. Why is she shoving my child's hand in her mouth? It's a bit gross and disgusting. I think it's fair enough to wash her hands immediately afterwards. Like, I would have done that anyway, even if no one had shoved the hand in their mouth. But fundamentally, I'm also a bit like, the husband didn't care, baby didn't care. The mother-in-law clearly didn't care. They were all just having fun. It was meant to be lighthearted. It was meant to be funny. It was meant to be a joke. Yes, babies do think a lot of unsanitary stuff is funny. My baby likes to shove his hand inside our dog's mouth, and then our dog licks it, and then he laughs his butt off because he thinks that this is hilarious if the dog is licking his hand. And then obviously immediately after the dog is done, we clean his hands so that if he shoves his hands in his mouth afterwards, it's not a problem. It is not a big deal, okay? It's really not. It happens sometimes. Babies get a bit dirty. Babies shove their hands in disgusting places. Another person's mouth, if it was diseased, does not have to be, like, at least a family member, okay? If it was a stranger, then yes, another person's mouth is pretty disgusting. I would kind of put it lower than my dog, because at least I know what my dog had in his mouth, which is usually not great things. But a family member shoving his hand in his mouth, it's weird. It wouldn't occur to me to do in the moment. I can actually kind of imagine my husband deciding to do it. So maybe it would occur to my husband to do it because he would think it's funny. But fundamentally, it's kind of like, this is a super minor situation. And you can see, like, there are all these hints here for why OP is totally over the top. The first one is she kept giving her husband the look to do something about his mom, and he obviously didn't react. So instead of saying, honestly, if someone was really doing something with my child that really annoyed me, then I would just go in and take my kid out of that situation. Like, I would not need my husband to reprimand his mom if she did something that I don't like, even especially if it's something minor like this, where it's like, yeah, I just need to wash my kid's hands, and then it's not a big deal. And then the rest of it, she says, in most ways, she's a very nice person, but he coddles his mom way too much, like she's going to mentally break if he says anything negative to her. And he wonders why I don't bring the kids to visit his mom more. And what that says to me is that actually the mother-in-law is quite normal. Like, she's a describes her as a nice person. And then she says, yeah, but the husband doesn't tell his mom off more. I would say that unless the mother does something that's actually a problem, then he doesn't need to get on her case. And I really don't think that this type of thing you need to make a big deal out of. Again, I would kind of get it if the mother-in-law smoked, if she had some kind of illness, some kind of disease, some kind of virus, some kind of reason for you to go, you're exposing myself to something actually harmful here. But this kind of play fighting, like, it's just, come on. Strange to me, yes. I wouldn't do it, fine. But I don't need to be quite so angry by it. Now, again, I'm the only person with this opinion. A lot of people here are like, ew. This is disgusting and creepy. I would have yelled at her in the moment and told her to back off. I wouldn't wait for the husband to step in. But since the past is the past, tell him that what she did was out of line. If something similar happens again, either he stops her or you will. Just because he coddles her doesn't mean you have to. I don't think it's disgusting and creepy. I think these are very strong words that you're using for a very minor situation that really doesn't matter. I don't think wiping icing on your face from a baby's hand is I just don't think it's a big deal. I think if you take a 1-year-old and you put them in one of those sand pits and they play in sand, and then they get a bit of water, they make it into mud, they shove the mud in their face, it's disgusting, sure, but it's a normal part of being a child and exploring the world and finding out what's going on. Shoving your hand in food is also just part of the experience of growing up. And sometimes adults do participate in that, and it makes kids really excited because then someone is kind of at their level and playing with them, and that's also fun. And you can think about it on that level instead of this, she touched her mouth, like, wow, mother-in-law really just didn't think. Has she done things like this before? I would probably just talk to her about it after the party so it doesn't seem too threatening. She probably thought that she was being funny and didn't realize how disgusting that was. And yeah, I imagine that she did just think it was funny because she was just playing with the kid, and she didn't think about it any more than that. Again, if you feel like telling her, look, I was just a bit grossed out by that, I'm not comfortable with my kid having her hand in your mouth, then I guess you could say that. But why would you pick a fight over something so small? Like, that's just so unnecessary. And then OP goes on this whole long explanation about the amount of conflict between both grandparents, like both sets of grandparents, who apparently really hate each other. And so that's why she didn't want to step in. And this is a really interesting comment, kind of unrelated to this particular case, but she says, I don't mean this harshly, but you need to be more firm with both your mother-in-law and your own family. Things turn into an argument because you allow it. You're de-escalating situations all the time because you've allowed your family and the in-laws to be comfortable being disrespectful and rude towards each other. If people act up, you tell them this is not the time or place and kick them out if they don't listen. And when you get unsolicited advice from either side, my parenting decisions are not up for discussion. Sounds like your family and in-laws need to be more mature and act like adults. They don't need to like each other, but they need to be civil if they want to be involved in your baby's life. And OP got pretty defensive over this. Fundamentally, I think OP is just does not have the confidence needed to be able to stand up for her kid in the way that she thinks is necessary. And I actually feel that this type of thread is a little bit the result of that. So it's because she's frustrated at herself for not responding properly in the moment that she then feels the need to get validation from other people on the internet saying, yeah, well, aren't I right? Wasn't this completely over the top and completely disgusting? Even though her husband disagrees with her, obviously, or he would have said or done something. So I think a really over the top reaction, and having this fallout from it where you're really thinking about your role as a parent and to what extent should you step in when in-laws do something that you don't like. It's fair enough as a thought, and you should probably have that, and you should understand where your boundaries are, but does it need to be over one of those really minor situations that just happen in the moment and are then over a second later and then everyone moves on with their lives? Like, I don't think that is necessarily the case. Here's a really good comment. She says, the sooner you accept your husband is his own person and will not automatically think and feel the same as you, the better off your marriage will be. Subtlety doesn't work when someone isn't on the same page as you. He won't view his mom as germy and disgusting because she's his mom. He won't think like you. So if you have an issue with something, you need to speak up out of respect for the relationship with all parties. And that's a fundamentally true statement. Like, honestly, when women do this thing where they expect their husbands to react, it reminds me so much of the Will Smith slap when he slapped Chris Rock at the Oscars. This moment when the wife gets really angry about something and she looks over to her husband and she gives him the glare, and then he has to do exactly what she wants him to do because he's like a dog that just follows orders. That's not a great dynamic for a marriage. And if you find yourself falling down into that, then you should probably stop. So no, this one is not the end of the world. You do not need to treat it. You don't need to freak out to this extent. Yes, you might find it disgusting and gross. It's okay. You just wash your kids' hands and then you move on with your life, and it is not a problem. And in general, if the dynamics of your relationship with your in-laws and the dynamics of your relationship with your husband are things that you're unhappy about, then that is the part that you should deal with, and that is the thing that you should be trying to change. This one is titled, Only Helpful Comments, Please. So this might be me being stupid, but I just have a simple question. Should your spouse be obsessed with you? like compliment you or show affection or just act like they like you and not just do nothing. I've been with the same man since I've been 16 and he was 21, and we are now 21 and 27. In the beginning, he would touch me, show me affection, do the little simple things, say that he loves me many times a day, give me compliments, kiss me, hug me, and so much more. We've had a few issues with him looking at girls and stuff in the past, and a few times while I was pregnant, but like every time he does that, it feels like he's less into me and we barely kiss or hug or pretty much anything. We have sex, but it's just sex. And I don't know, sometimes it feels like a chore now. And also every time we have sex, it just feels like he's not thinking about me. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking about that part, but it's just the fact that he doesn't want to go on dates or really ever cuddle. Honestly, sometimes I just don't want to be affectionate towards him because he's so critical towards me. He acts like I'm dumb sometimes and just always thinks that he's right and I'm wrong. I sometimes don't even know. And he asks me why I'm always upset or mean or not in the mood for anything. And when I try to talk to him about it, he gets mad at me. So I don't ever talk about anything with him. So I just sit there and listen to his problems, and I'm supposed to be fine no matter what. I don't know. Opinions? This one is quite an unfortunate thread because it does sound like there are some pretty major problems in their marriage. I fundamentally, like, she presents it in a really messed up way to me anyway, where she starts by saying, should your spouse be obsessed with you? I don't think your spouse needs to be obsessed with you, especially when you're many years down a relationship. You know each other pretty well by that point. You've gone through the whole dating honeymoon phase. I think all couples settle, hopefully, into this space of comfort and security and stability that's quite normal. I guess it also depends to a large extent what you mean by obsessed. I don't think of obsessed as a healthy behavior. I guess some people might assume that that means that you spend time with each other, that he cares about you, that he expresses affection towards you, and so on. And so the framing that she goes for in the second half of this story is very different from what I read when I read the first half. I hear something completely different and I imagine something completely different. So no, I think that that your partner does not need to be obsessed with you, but that you do want to have some amount of validation, some compliments, that you want to go on dates together, that you want to spend times together. All of these are pretty normal things to want in a relationship. And all of these are things that I would be talking to him about. And that then it seems like they're just not able to handle conversations with each other all that well. And then that's its own problem. So basically, if I were OP, I would probably suggest something along the lines of therapy in this case. I know everyone suggests therapy for everything, but it seems to me like they're just not able to communicate. And it's good for them to try to communicate with each other, but the way that she describes it, that he makes her feel dumb, that he's really critical towards her, that he gets mad at her if she talks to him, so she just sits there and listens to him. It seems to me like OP especially is not mature enough to be able to handle figuring out a different style of communication that brings them both together. Obviously, I can't see anything from the other guy, so maybe he is also equally as immature, and that's why it's going so badly in terms of them being able to communicate. But I would say that that's a fundamental problem here, and that has nothing to do with the husband or partner or whatever being obsessed with you. That's just how do you try and build a foundation that can actually sustain your relationship over a longer period of time. And the age difference here of she was 16 and he was 21 is a little bit of a dodgy age difference. That doesn't sound right to me. But I can imagine that some relationships may be able to succeed at the tail end of that, so long as both people have a similar maturity level. And I guess that's the fundamental question here: do they have a similar maturity level? Yeah. So it's a pretty tough situation. I would say that if you are not able to have conversations within your relationship, especially about things that are really important, then that's a really bad sign for where your relationship is heading. That one is something that I would say is probably the end of the world. The comments here: some people aren't affectionate, but if he used to be and now isn't, then something is wrong. What does he say when you address your concerns? My husband and I have been together 13 years and married 10, and he's still very affectionate and cuddly, sometimes annoyingly so. If he were to suddenly stop, I'd have my suspicions. I kind of agree with this to some extent. Usually if people have a sudden change of behavior where you're like, I don't understand where this came from or why you're suddenly a different person, then that is motivated by something that does come from somewhere. But honestly, the difference of 21 and 27, like there's a pretty big age gap there. And also the difference between 16 and 21, like both of those are periods in which you grow a lot and you develop a lot. And in an ideal scenario, if you get into a marriage or into a relationship when you're pretty young, then you both grow and develop with each other in some ways. So yes, you might change differently, but each person contributes to the other person growing in their own particular way. And so as you develop and become older and become more mature, then hopefully in an ideal scenario, your relationship gets stronger, you move closer together, you become a strong couple through that. And so I'm not surprised that there would be a change in behavior between 21 and 27 or between 16 and 21. The question is what's causing the behavior, and is it just part of the normal maturation process? And if they're both just maturing as people separately, then how can you still focus on the relationship enough that you can build it up again, that they come together? One of the other comments here, OP says that it really breaks her heart because I love him so much and I feel like we are soulmates. So OP says that the fact that she's experiencing these problems is heartbreaking for her and she feels like they are soulmates. And then a person here replies, then don't question his interest. You're married, you have kids. It sounds like he's frustrated that you're questioning his love. If you love him and think that you're soulmates, treat him as such. It is amazing how much people feed off the environment around them. If you show him affection and tell him constantly that you love him, I bet he will start doing the same again. And then a person replies to that and says, sorry, this is terrible advice. A response to someone not listening to your concerns and only wanting to be supported through their own problems and not supporting their partner is not for the partner to just further bury their own needs. And I think that both people here have some point. So one aspect of it is if you do get yourself in this mindset of, yeah, it does everything kind of suck. Maybe he doesn't like me anymore. He doesn't treat me exactly the same as he used to treat me. And then you also put out like negative energy towards the other person. Maybe you're a bit more snappy, you're a bit more distant, you're a bit more hard to handle and hard to deal with and hard to respond to. And then that creates even more distance and that worsens it. So there's some element of that where the energy that you put out into the world does come back to you. But also, again, it sounds like they're not really able to sit down and have a normal, reasonable conversation. And I think that that's the fundamental problem that they're experiencing here. So, OP, my primary recommendation would be to try to figure out a better way to sit down together and connect with each other. There are a couple of tools and a couple of resources that people have out there. I would probably recommend John Deloney for anyone who hasn't heard of him. And he has this little deck of cards where you ask questions to the other person. It's just a tool to kickstart conversations. And if you use it in this type of setting where you're both relaxed and you're both calm and you're both in a good mood, and then you take out one of these questions, then you can have much more deep, meaningful conversations with the other person. These are the types of things that I would try and invest in doing. And then maybe trying to get a third opinion when it comes to someone else who can observe how you're talking to each other and give you some guidance and some feedback in terms of building a better communication. I think that would be the best way to try and save this marriage. Our final one for the day is titled, Feels Like I Need to Give Up on Breastfeeding a 6-day-old for the sake of my marriage. Baby is 6 days old, but 6 days old only, but breastfeeding has been the biggest source of stress and is causing regular arguments between my husband and I. And I'm finding it so hard to feel like continuing with no support and regular discouragement. For context, baby was very overdue, so I ended up the baby ended up being born through induction, then C-section. We stayed in hospital longer and the baby was supplemented with formula due to a low blood sugar check after we inquired about his hands tremoring. All other sugar checks were good, but we kept supplementing due to poor latch and to keep his blood sugar stable. Now we are home and my husband is hyper-focused on knowing the exact volume of his input. That breastfeeding makes him anxious. Because we're supplementing, my supply has been only about half of what the baby needs. I am torn and confused and need to stop the fighting with my husband before baby gets colicky or into purple crying territory. I've seen a lactation consultant and they had great tips, but my husband isn't fully on board. The baby has great output, a poopy diaper at least once a day, and regular pees. Can anyone relate? Does anyone have advice? I like this one because it shows you a little bit of the contrast and a little bit of, like, something of an example that men and dads can also be the anxious ones in a marriage, especially with a newborn, so a very, very young baby. I think that this is one of those circumstances where you'll often see the woman who is breastfeeding getting very stressed out and kind of harangued by this idea that you're not able to measure exactly how much the baby is nursing at different times. And that gives you this like lack of control, and knowing, especially having had a rough start and knowing that the baby may have struggled early on in life. I mean, it's only 6 days old. So early on in life is like 2 days ago. Then that gives you much more the sense of anxiety that you have to work past. Being on opposite ends of this from your partner while you're trying to make it through a problem like this is unbelievably stressful, and I cannot imagine going through it. I think that if I were OP in this situation, I would probably try to calm my husband down, because honestly, anxiety and trying to make decisions based on anxiety is not good, and it's not a good long-term strategy. And so the question is, okay, how have women been feeding babies, been nursing babies for millennia before today? And that the answer to that question is obviously that they have been doing that without being able to know the exact output. Fundamentally, a 6-day-old needs about like this much milk in one feeding. Like, it's pretty much nothing. You have to imagine the size of their bellies and how much they're able to drink in any one sitting. It's just not very, very much. All that said, I think being stressed out when you have a 6-day-old is pretty normal, especially, like I said, if you have a C-section and you have this, you have to supplement because of a sugar problem and a blood sugar problem and so on. Like, this is pretty normal. I think that people make permanent decisions a little bit too quickly under some circumstances when they're stressed out. So I would try and take a step back, take a breath, get some external people in who can try and give you a different sense of perspective, and maybe try and get some sleep, and then see if you can really sit down and talk about how to proceed. In general, the idea that you need to give up on breastfeeding for the sake of your marriage because your husband is super stressed out, like, that is totally unnecessary. That is not a mindset that you need to put on yourself. It's just a question of talking to your husband and trying to get on the same page. I guess it depends on what level of anxiety he has, but I think if you make him realize that he's also super anxious, then you will get there as well. Here's an example of a comment. She says, let your husband know that we haven't survived thousands of years knowing what our milk output was. Your body does, though, and as long as the baby is developmentally growing and has good diaper output, you're already doing good. Babies breastfeed for other reasons other than feeding, and they thrive on it. Breastfed babies will only ever need 1 to 1.5 ounces per hour max of a 4 ounces per feeding session, no matter what his age is, because your body adjusts to it, adjusts to fit the baby's needs, whereas formula does not, which is why you need to increase the volume of it over time. If you're bottle feeding, make sure that you pace feed so you don't overfeed him. Babies have the natural instinct to suck, so if you give them a bottle, they'll gobble that right up. Right now, you need even less than that because a baby's belly is so small right now, so you're probably producing enough since your body hasn't regulated yet, usually by 6 weeks. Ditch the formula, latch the baby on demand and often, and tell your husband that your body is smarter than he is and will do what your baby needs. And obviously some people will argue about this. Fundamentally, getting breastfeeding right is really about having support and having the right knowledge and having the right education to be able to do it for a longer period of time. This idea of just the amount that babies drink and being aware of that is something that's very difficult for a lot of people to grasp. And also this idea that a breastfed baby, like milk, naturally adjusts itself to meet the baby's needs, whereas formula does not, is obviously a very, very, very different perspective as well. So yeah, this is just one of those circumstances where you can see how anxiety manifests itself in both sexes, sometimes even if it's mostly women who really suffer from it. In general, it is normal. It is especially normal after people have just given birth, and when you're still in that, like in the very first few days after having a new baby are usually the hardest for most people. They weren't so hard for us because our baby was asleep like 90% of the time, but they're the ones where you experience the shift the most. Like, obviously the change between pre-baby and after baby is very, very huge, and so it's just about taking a little bit of time to get through that. And on that note, that's all we have time for today. If you like the episode, feel free to leave a comment or like the video, and I will see you next time.